I'm in the fourth set of practice problems, and I'm going to go through a few of them, starting with this one, number 7. Okay, so I have these two premises, if A, then not B, and if A, then B. My conclusion is not A. Okay, and you might see how this is going to, well, you might see why not A has to be true, because if A is true, then it leads to both not B and B, and that, of course, is a contradiction. And so we're going to assume A, get this contradiction, and then when we use negation introduction, we'll be able to get not A. So that's my assumption. Now I can do arrow elim twice. Okay, so now on 2 consecutive lines, I have a contradiction, not B and B. So back here against the main vertical line of my proof, I can put the opposite of my assumption, which is not A. And that's going to be negation introduction, because I'm adding a not sign here. And the subproof is lines 3 through 5. Okay, now in this one, I have the one premise, and my conclusion is not P and Q. Okay, so what I want to do here is make the opposite of my conclusion the assumption, like I've done before, but in this case, that's going to be P and Q. Okay, so if you have this assumption, maybe you can see how this is going to go. Okay, so again, I have a contradiction here, not Q and Q at the end of my subproof. So back here on line 6 against the main vertical line of the proof, I'm going to put the opposite of my assumption, and that's going to be not P and Q, and the P and Q have to be in parentheses so that the not ranges over the whole thing. Okay, next. All right, so for these two, I'll do both 9 and 10. You see here that we're going to need 2 subproofs, so these are maybe a little trickier. Okay, so I have not P, and I want to get if P, then Q. So my first move is going to be to make P my assumption, or make P my first assumption, and that assumption is going to be for arrow introduction. Okay, so my goal is going to be to go through however many lines it takes and then get Q so that I can discharge this assumption and get P arrow Q. But let's see, how am I going to get Q? I'm going to assume not Q. Okay, and there I needed 4 spaces to get to this second subproof. Okay, so I have not Q. All right, so what I want is not P. I'm just moving that down from line 1 with the reiteration rule. Now I want P, which I'm again just moving down with the reiteration rule from line 2. Okay, so there's my contradiction. So here on line 6, and this is against the main vertical line of the first subproof, I'm going to put Q. That is the opposite of what I have on line 3 there. So that's going to be negation elim 3 through 5. Okay, so now I have Q just like I wanted. So on line 7, back against the main vertical line of the entire proof, I can put P arrow Q. Arrow intro lines 2 through 6. All right. Okay, so for this one, again, I'm going to begin by making an assumption, and that assumption is going to be eventually for arrow introduction. Okay, next I'm going to start another subproof. I'm going to assume not G. So I can see right now that if I can get a contradiction, then I'll be able to discharge this assumption and get G. And if I have not G, then I can see that I can do wedge elim on this premise 1, or line 1 rather. Okay, so next I want to get, so I've got a Q here in line 2, and I've got a not Q that's in line 4. That's part of this conjunction, so I know that if I do conjunction elim, I can get not Q on one line, and then I can move this Q in line 2 down using the reiteration rule. Okay, so I have a contradiction here on lines 5 and 6. That means on line 7, I can put G, okay, there, and that's against the main vertical line for this first subproof. And that's going to be negation elim 3 through 6. All right, so now I have G on line 7. That means that I can, back against the main vertical line of the entire proof, I can put Q arrow G. That's going to be arrow intro lines 2 through 7. Okay, so those last two were maybe a little harder, but just makes them more interesting. But they may take a little more time for you to get through proofs like that. So just keep working at it. Don't get frustrated.